Hello and welcome to the Memory Capsule podcast, where we interview members of the Pokemon trading card game community. My name is Rafal Gladys. Each week we'll be speaking with our guests about their background with Pokemon TCG, how they got involved with the game, and give them an opportunity to share their love of the game. Today's guest is Zander Bennett. Zander recently got top 4 at Fort Wayne Regionals and is on the cusp of locking up his World's invite for the year. Zander has over a decade of success in the Pokemon TCG, making day 2 in multiple regionals, including top 4 at Phoenix Regionals in 2015. He is also an expert in the Cube format, a fun and alternative way of playing the Pokemon TCG that has been growing in popularity in recent years. How you doing, Zander?
I'm good. I was telling you before, but just so that the viewers can hear, if my voice sounds silly, it's because I've still been losing it after EUIC. But I'm really glad to be doing this. This is my jet lag day, so I go back to work tomorrow. It works out really well that we were able to do this today.
Perfect. I appreciate you having you with us here. If anyone is only hearing your voice for the first time, which would be a surprise because you've been all over the podcast world and the TCG recently, what would you like our listeners to know about you?
I guess in terms of the game, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to when you're friends with people who have like won regionals and whatnot, and like you're talking to people who you consider like much better than you on a daily basis, it's hard to like have a grasp of perspective of like what tournament impact I've had in the game. But then like I look back and people have been like, wow, I really love like the Sylveon deck you came up with, or like Mega Ray got me my first top 8. And it's like, oh well, I actually did have like some innovation that got people towards like more decks that they enjoyed or closer to their invite. I guess recently, yeah, I have kind of had like a heater of a season. I was really bummed to bomb out at London because I made 4 back-to-back day 2s and was really hoping I was joking that it was going to be the Wendy's 4 for 4 to the Wendy's $5 biggie bag. I could not afford the extra dollar on that, but yeah, I guess that's it. I used to do podcasting on my own with the original Meta podcast TCG. No hard feelings to them using the name now. And I did some streaming. We'd stream cups and whatnot. I was actually checking with my locals to see if we were streaming our League Cup coming up, and if not, then you'll see me doing that. And maybe you heard my name from Fake Format a super long time ago when I made like 50 different trading card game decks of my own and sleeved them and brought them to events. Uh, I've done a lot. I care about this game far too much.
Hey, that's why we have you on here, right? Because we all love the game. To just get us started, I'm going to ask you the question we ask all of our guests, which is, what is your favorite card of all time and why?
Okay, so when you mentioned this to me, I felt completely put on spot. So I'm just going to go with what went to my head first, but I think it's actually a pretty good answer. It is the Attack Command Empoleon, the Diving Draw Attack Command Empoleon from
Oh,
Dark
okay.
Explorers. It was in my first deck that I top 8 of the cities with in Masters. I played like one regional and a nationals in seniors, and then I aged up into Masters. Um, it's a card that I've always liked decks that like put a bunch of Pokemon into play and draw a bunch of cards, and that's a ton of fun. It always felt like Empoleon was something you could brew with. Like originally there was like the Empoleon Dusknoir deck, which is what I made my that top 8 with, but then there was like Empoleon Magnezone, Empoleon with like Archies. We played that in Night March and Flareon builds. And then when I came back to Cube, Empoleon was one of the first cards that I looked at for water, but it's just like a good. I feel like if Empoleon is one of the better things to be doing in a format, I think it's really healthy. Like discard a card, draw 2 has always been really popular and really fair. And then Attack Command, we've seen like previously on cards like Jump Bluff, and since then with like different Pokemon that count how many things you have in play. Like currently the Raikus and the Palkias of the world, like they count all that damage math. So like that kind of attack's not going anywhere, and so I think it's fun to like see that throughout the history of the game. And I don't know, it's just a really neat card. I think that like it was really cool already, and then Archie's like turned the whole world wide open for it. Like I know that people remember Archie's Blastoise probably more than they remember Archie's Empoleon, but there was definitely like, whoop, I get to Archie's into Empoleon to protect myself from Trump card. Like it was just a really neat card. I don't know if I tanked on this question for a week, I don't know if that would be my answer, but I feel like it's only fair to say like if it's the first thing that comes to your head, it's probably pretty close to your favorite card.
Yeah, I feel like none of us are. If we're just asked that question on the spot, I'm sure one of the first things in our mind is probably going to be pretty important to us. Now, you were saying that you played at least like one nationals and a few other events before you started in Masters. Could you tell us how you got involved with the game?
Yeah, I went to my local game store to buy Pokemon Black, or I bought whichever one had Zekrom. So it was the opposite. So Pokemon White.
White, yeah.
I went to my locals to get Pokemon White, and just completely happened to go while they were having Pokemon League. And like I had no clue that League was a thing. I had no clue that tournaments were a thing. My best friend from childhood, Will Beaudry, and I, like, we would always collect like Pokemon cards as kids, and like we didn't know what energies did, and like we would just like attack each other with them and see the shiny cards and think they were cool. And it was like when we found out about that league that we were like, oh, we're gonna like commit to this. We're gonna like learn how to play like the actual way and build decks. And so I started going and I built like the craziest decks. They were like practically unlimited decks just because it was like what I had. And then from there started to learn about like standard and rotation, and had to get through buying $20 Pokemon catchers and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah,
Like, oh
yeah.
man, if you
Everything you
you
say is so nostalgic for me because like Heart Gold Soul Silver to Black and White is exactly when I started playing as well.
well, if you're listening to this now, if you didn't know, I'll tell you what, you are not missing out on $20 Pokemon catcher. Let me just put you there. Emerging Powers was short printed, right? And it was an uncommon, but everyone needed four, so it was still like a $20 uncommon.
And for anyone who doesn't know, the original Pokemon Catcher did not have a flip, so it was just a boss on an item card.
Yeah, and it was busted, and you could junk arm for it at that time because junk arm was legal when it first was printed. So it was everywhere, and then it was, I mean, it was a 3 or 4 of in every deck until it turned into a flip with the legendary treasures errata. I think was when it was errated,
Um,
2014. Yeah, it was errated right before it was errated right before cities, because that's when like the Yeti plasma deck was good, and like you would play Virizion or you would play Genesect just to be like a gust.
yeah, and I've looked back at Emerging Powers, and I'm like that set essentially had like no competitive impact except for Catcher, Gothitelle, and that
You trying
might
to
be
you
it.
trying to tell me that the Tornadus that for 3 energy did 80 wasn't a format staple?
Well, I played that Thundurus from that set in to get top 8 at states, so it's
Hey, we
there's
take
something
those.
there. So at what point did you then kind of start taking the game more competitively and start attending events? What was that like for you? Because I'm assuming we were both probably in high school at that point. So how did you
Uh,
start getting to all these tournaments in the area?
yeah, that same friend's mom who I was talking about would just drive us to stuff. The first cities that I played in was at a church. It was at like they rented the gym of a church and set up a bunch of tables, and it was cities. And at that point I was still in, I guess I played a cities and seniors. It was the one cities that's sticking out to me. And I met my now lifelong friend Dalen Dockery because my league leader was like, hey, there's this kid you should meet, he's pretty good. And I actually, now that I think about it, I actually don't think he ever said he was a kid. I think I was expecting to meet like a grown adult that this person was saying was really good, and then I come to find out that he's like 4 months older than me and still in seniors. And so he's funny enough playing Empoleon. He was playing it was called like Empire. It was like Empoleon with Landorus EX, Terrakion, and Mewtwo. Because the blend energy let you power up Empoleon and Landorus. Uh, and I was playing like this awful Cresselia EX deck because I was like, dude, it's so sick. You put 4 energy on
Whoa,
it. You
Cresselia
one shot a
EX.
Yeah, yeah, you one shot a Mewtwo, and then you don't have weakness, so the Mewtwo doesn't kill you back. And then I went against him. He was just like catcher, catcher, and he like killed the Cresselia in one shot. So I think that he got second, and then I did really bad. But I mean, we've been friends since then. We would always joke like later as like we got better, like who was gonna get their name on Pokemon's website a second time? Because I got a top 4 at regionals, and then he got second at a regionals. And we were like, all right, who's gonna get their name up on that website a second time? And it was him. So it's like, um, but since then, I mean, like he was in my wedding, I've been in his wedding. He's been another great lifelong friend. It's amazing. Like I think back, it's like wow, all these people that like you think are like just friends that you meet at tournaments, and it's like just an opponent. It's like oh no, like these are people I've really talked to for like a decade.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, just this last weekend, the judge who ran the league that taught me how to play, I ended up playing against him at a cup at a challenge this last weekend. So like, you see these people like years later, and you still are able to like catch up with them, see how they're doing. So, and especially going to big tournaments. I was at Far Wayne, saw a lot of people I hadn't seen in a while. I'm sure at EUIC you're seeing a lot of people who you've been talking to online but haven't really seen for a while, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I got to meet a lot of the European community who I had never talked to. I mean, like a lot of them do come to America for events, but like I drafted with Tord and a bunch of his buddies and a lot of the Australian community, and it was like kind of crazy. Like even though like I would consider myself decent, it's like oh I'm drafting with Skarzig, Kyle Sablehouse, and Nico and Tord. It's like I'm not supposed to be here. Like this is a whole other league, but like it's just like it's a I think that we think there's much more of a hierarchy in the community than there is when it's just like it's a bunch of people that love the game. And it's like even friends who you meet recently. Like I uh I flew out to London a day before the rest of my travel group because it was like $50 cheaper and I had never been to London. So I was like, whatever, I'll just book an Airbnb and like it kind of cancels out. And I like, oh no, I have to spend an extra day in London. Um, but I wanted to hang out with some people, and I just messaged one of my opponents from Fort Wayne who I knew was going, who I had like only ever known for a week, and I was like, "Hey, what are y'all doing?" And they're like, "We want to go shopping and dinner," and I was like, "Bet." So it's like just hanging out with, I mean, obviously not strangers, but like four people I had never met before, and then the guy that I had only met once. But it's like it's the community, like
For
it's
sure.
so like bondable.
Definitely. And obviously there's like always exceptions, but like by and large everyone's just so welcoming in this community. It's so nice. Before we started before we started recording at least, you were talking a little bit about your finish with Mega Ray at Phoenix Regionals in 2015, which was kind of your
Yeah,
first big break. Could you tell us a bit about that season? You said it was one of the better seasons you've had, and it was a list you were very fond of. Could you tell us a bit about that?
yeah. So the decks that were popular at that time were like Evatol with Dark Patch and Darkrai, Toad Garb and stuff. Night March was like starting to become a thing and expanded, and then like Archiestoise. Archiestoise was like the new wave that everyone thought was like bonkers, and so actually this whole story is really funny. So because I pulled up the list here because I knew that I'd end up talking about Mega Ray at this point. So I fly out to Phoenix, first time flying by myself. I think I'm 16, and my friends pick me up from the airport, and I go back to the house, and Brandon Smiley and the Mad Pulse people are playing like File Plume, Miltank, Aegislash with like Forest of Giant Plants. And so it's like they're using Miltank and like Vileplumes are stage two, Miltank to two-shot things under the ability lock with Aegislash. And I had worked on this Mega Ray list with Rahul Reddy and Michael Canavis, and the list was like four Acrobike, four Trainer's Mail, only an N and a Colress where you're only draw supporters. The whole engine was like Versus Seeker and Shaman. And so I'm sitting there like, this matchup is the most terrible matchup that I could ever think of. And these are all people that I respect and they are going to do well. And I'm going to get bodied by this. And so I'm like, the only out that I have to play items is two Hex Maniac. And if I play Hex, then I can't Shaman. So like I had been testing this deck before, and at the airport I had like a 5 hour layover because the flight attendants were late, so it turned like my hour-long layover into a rescheduled 5 hour layover for the next following flight. So I was just sitting there doing Goldfish Hands, and Mega Ray was bricking. I was barely getting like turn one attacks off, so I was like, I gotta switch off this deck. This deck sucks, even though it's awesome, but it sucks. And the night before, I'm like, should I switch this Vileplume deck? Like, it seems so good. It has so many good answers to the format. Like, you play a Scrapper and you turn off Garbodor, and then Vileplume like locks the Toad deck, and then they can't beat you. Uh, you like have like Aegislash to get around all the special energy stuff. So like Night March is not setting up. Like, it just seemed really good. And I was like, no, you came out here with this deck, like you know it's good. You should play it. Like you finally bought Shamans when they were really expensive. Like just play the deck. Oh gosh, Shamans were so pricey. I don't even remember. at that format. What I don't remember at what point they were when I got them. I remember they were like $50 minimum when they
That's what
came
I
out.
remember
It
them
was
being. Yeah.
crazy. So naturally, round one at like a 300-person regional, I faced one of the people on the Vileplume deck that I am so worried about. There's like a team of like maybe 8 to 10 people who are on this deck, and I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna get bodied, and I Hulk smash him. Like it's not even close. I think that I go first, and I just like turn one, get my whole board fill up, put a double colorless on the Mega Ray, and then next they like promote an Aegislash. I'm just like attach Grass, Hexmaniac, versus Seeker for Hexmaniac, so it's back in my hand knockout, and I just like destroy it. Uh, I end up going against Brandon Smiley later in the day, like round 8, and he's on the same deck. He ends up making top 8 with it. I beat him again, and like I basically farmed my way through Archistoises because Mega Ray just like bodied Archistois. So I was 7-1-1 going into day 2. Started off day 2, loss. I bricked the hardest that I ever had against oh, it wasn't Kenny Wisdom. Oh gosh, who? It was someone. I hate that I'm blanking on it. I think it was Paul. It was he works for Pokemon now. I'm not entirely certain. I'm sure that I could go back and figure it out. But I start off 0-2 and like I rattle off 3 on the day. On my winning in, I face Sean Hip on the Vileplume deck, and I'm terrified, and I beat it again. Like this deck that I was so worried about, I went 3-0 against in Swiss. Uh, and then oh no. So then in top 8, I go up against Evital deck, and I body it. I think it was
And
Evital, and then
was
I
this the
lose.
regionals where like day 1 is standard, day 2 is expanded? Was it
No,
this?
no, no, no. That was the year before. This was all expanded.
Okay.
But the good clarifying, because that makes event history very hard. Where it's like,
Yes.
oh, you got a player that went 9-0 in standard, but with the deck that's not what they played in top 8 because you switched to expanded. um, and then I lost to Getsis in top 4 because Israel Sosa played Getsis, and the whole deck was like the 4 Acrobat, 4 Trainer's Mail, 4 Ultra Ball, 4 versus Seeker, and you just got left with a hand of like Virizion Grass Energy, and you're done.
Was this Israel Sosa's just like regionals run? Was this
I
that
think
year?
I think this was the first of like 3 regionals I think that he won that year. It was insane. You give him a deck with dark energies. But I was really proud. I mean, that was my I had never flown for a tournament before. It was like my fall break of school, so I was like, this is gonna be so much fun. Like I'm gonna go on my fall break. I don't really care how I do. Like this, I think this deck is sweet. I don't really know of anyone else who was on that deck for the event, but like it was really cool to say that I came up with it on my own is definitely a lie. Like I did work with the Floridians on it for sure. I think I was just the only one that went. So it was really neat to like be the deck that everyone had no clue what was going on, and I'm pretty sure that I could find the day 2 for it. And I'm like, I'm the only Mega Ray that's in there.
Now before we started recording, you were telling me a bit about the like posting the deck list. Could you tell us that story again?
Yeah, so I have always in like playing Pokemon been like totally cool with sharing deck lists. It's like not a thing that like if it's my deck list. In the past I like was kind of a leak and I own that now. I just like didn't realize what that was then, but like when it's my deck list, like I'll just hand it to people and be like, this is the 60 I'm playing. If you want to play this deck at a regional, go nuts. Like it's all yours. The odds we face each other are incredibly low. And that was the one time that I decided like not to post the list because I was like, this deck is super good. I want to kind of hold it to myself for a little bit. If people want to build it, they can go watch the stream. It's sadly not up anymore, but like they can figure out the deck. And so I did a whole interview with Team Fish Knuckles on their YouTube channel. I'm still in Arizona when I do it, and I'm like, nope, I'm not going to share the list this time. And then later that week is the very first time that Pokemon posts the deck list on their website because they didn't do it then. And I'm like, why? Like, why is this the one time they do it? So if you look in Verbank, it's still on there. The post of my deck is just Mega Ray with it's the Mega Ray, the trophy, and like 2 Hex Maniac and 2 Hoopa. No deck list.
And then like a week later, it's all online.
Yeah. And now it's just like that's just reinforced the like why like that and Limitless era are like why even be that secretive? Like the only edge you can get is kind of to be hyper secretive, but like regionals are so big that I'm not even worried about it.
Yeah, and even like before COVID, there was still some players who kind of wouldn't show their list, but now Arcanine just posts them all after the regional, so
I
you know.
think that the League Cup that just happened at London had more players than that regional. Like just for
Really?
context of the game, I think that that regional that I did well at had like 310, 320 people, and I think that that League Cup had like 330 people. Like it's just 338 people. Yeah, I think that that regional had like 318 players, and they're like, okay, cool. Now you've got a side event. You have a glorified side event at an IC that's bigger than the regional.
But that's like the London Open after Worlds also. It just had like hundreds of players. It had two pools for the
Yeah.
event. Now there is one deck that shows up on your Limitless page that I did want to ask about, which is the Sylveon deck. When I was first getting back in the game, I would kind of look at these old tournaments. I would see the Sylveon deck and be a little confused because it's just like an Eevee, a Sylveon line, and like 40 trainers. Can you tell us a bit about that deck, how it worked, why you liked it so much? I have your camera on my end for anyone who's listening, and I see that he has a little Sylveon behind him right there on the camera. So clearly you're a fan of it. Could you tell us a bit
Yeah.
about that deck?
So we before Pokemon started streaming all the regionals, we streamed uh Meta Podcast, we streamed Fort Wayne regionals. And Kyle Lesnowitz, I always think that I mispronounce his last name. If I did, I'm sorry, but he knows who he is. He played Sylveon in Expanded, like way before it was ever like a thing in Standard. I don't even know if that list is on Limitless. I might honestly try to see if it's on there while I'm talking to you.
Kyle, I
Kyle
see. Yeah, he
L.
has three Sylveon lists, and the one from Fort Wayne does not have a list.
Okay, so I have that list from a long time ago because when we streamed him, we put him on stream, and because it was like this deck, there's no one else in day two of this deck. I think he made top 16, and it seemed like really sweet. And I looked at the list, and basically everything was there for it to work in standard as a control deck. Like you kind of just had to change the Versus Seeker engine, so like you couldn't do that in standard, but there was like a lot of stuff that like you still had Flare Grunt, you still had Max Potion, like all of this kind of control-y stuff still worked.
And could you just tell us what Sylveon does for anyone who doesn't
Oh
know?
yeah, okay. So I guess we really should have started there. I got excited talking about it. So the Sylveon GX is it's a stage one that the only way the deck works is actually because of the EV. There's an EV that has energy evolution, which is like on all the EVs. I don't feel like I need to explain that. So you turn one evolve into Sylveon, and then Sylveon's attack for one fairy. You search your deck for any three cards and you put them into your hand. And people initially it came out right after Quad Lapras won a regional in the hands of James Arnold, and Lapras just drew three cards. It didn't search for three cards; it drew three cards, and so James Arnold won a regional with that. And everyone was like, "Holy crap! There's this control deck that just won a regional, and now Sylveon gets to search for three cards instead of getting any three cards. This is going to ruin the format." Um, so then, if you look at Guardians Rising format, Sylveon did not ruin the format. In fact, Sylveon was terrible because it got bodied by Garbodor decks because you couldn't put items in your discard pile, and they only needed one Psychic to do like 200 damage to you. So rotation comes, Buzzwole starts doing well, Zoroark starts doing well, and then Fort Wayne happens and it's expanded. And so we come back to standard, and the standard format's like still some Garbodor decks, Buzzwole, Zoroark, Volcanion, like Bulu got a little bit more popular later, Gardevoir, etc. So I play this deck at a League Cup, and I'm like, this seems good. I don't know if anyone's going to be playing Gardevoir, like just the way the meta was shaking out at the time. And round one, I go against my now wife, who is playing.
Really?
Yes, who's playing Gardevoir, and we were like, no tips. Like we're like gonna just try to play, and she would have wrecked me, but she forgot to use Twilight GX to shuffle back a bunch of stuff. And like that's the way you win the matchup. It's like you just get back your super rod, your energies, and whatnot. So after the match, all my friends came over and they're like, "You would have beat Xander. Why didn't you Twilight GX?" So the meme for a while was like, "Babe, why didn't you Twilight?" Um, And then later on in that tournament, funny enough, like cancel me if you want. My opponent, like I'm like on a win and into cut. My opponent accidentally end baits me, and I like shuffle my hand in, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I already played a supporter." And I was like, "Well, I already searched for my 3 cards. Like I know what 3 cards I got." And he was like, "Yeah." So I just like got the 3 cards out of my deck. Like the Pokemon was a different game back then. So
Yeah,
like you can
yeah.
give me a break now. I was like 17 or 18. But uh it was like a double supporter situation. He didn't shovel his hand in because like he realized it before, but like I heard N and I like shuffled my hand in.
So it was just like an honest
Uh
mistake. Everyone got cleared
yeah,
up,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So then I go on to win the League Cup with Sylvie. It's the second League Cup I've ever won. Like it was kind of crazy. Like I took this deck and I was like, okay, cool. This deck is sick, but it's got an awful Gardevoir matchup. Uh, and then I'm talking to Dalen, the same guy who I talked about earlier, and he was like, well, why don't you play a 101 Gardevoir GX line, and so that you can use Twilight GX to shuffle stuff back too. And initially we were like, the whole engine worked because you started with the EV, you could start searching for cards on turn 1. So if you started Ralts and you didn't have a way to get anything, you just lost the game. You played like A and N. So like we had to up our nest ball counts and whatnot. And I played the 101 Gardevoir at Memphis. Actually, I'm going to come back to another story. Remind me that I have a Memphis story with Gardevoir. But I was super worried about the Gardevoir matchup because they like shovel cards back into their deck, and I 3-0'd, or I've faced 3 Gardevoirs and I beat 3 Gardevoirs. The only reason I missed day 2 was I went against a Buzzrock. I won like a 30-minute game 1, and then game 2 was the only time I whiffed a Fairy Energy on turn 1 on an EV, and I got donked by a Buzzwole.
Oh, it just like attached knockout win the game.
Yep. And so game 3 just went to time and we tied. So I finished like 6-1-2, 38th at like that 1,000-person regional. And like then at another regional, St. Louis, I hit the only 2 Greninja that made top 64 at that tournament, and that matchup's really bad. So after like playing this deck, I won another cup with it. I got second to the cup, and then like the first top 8 the deck got was in Kyle Lesnowitz's hands. We started a Sylveon group chat of me, him, Max Kettler, and Landon. I don't remember his last name, but like it was like 4 of us that had done really well with Sylveon, and we were like, what's the 55th through 60th card that we run for this tournament? Like, what are we trying to beat? Do we play the Hoopa? Do we play second dumbbells? All that dumb stuff. But it got its first top 8 at Charlotte of that year in Kyle's hands, and then he proceeded to top 16 nationals with it later on. But I've learned that I like playing decks on like 2 ends of the spectrum where your opponent doesn't really get to play the game. There's like the Mega Ray and Mew side, which is like, I'm going to knock you out on turn 2, ability lock you, you're not going to draw cards and hope for the best side of like you don't get to play the game. And then there's like the Sylveon Pidgeotto control side where it's like, it's turn 30, you're in an infinite loop, you're going to lose the game, we can do this all day. Like, and so Sylveon was the back half of that. The Memphis story I wanted to tell is I drove 45 minutes away from my house and realized I left my deck at home.
Oh.
And yeah, I packed Autumn's deck. I made sure that we had all of our luggage and stuff. And I was like, wait a second, I don't think I have my deck because I think it was in a bag that I didn't grab. And we pulled over, I didn't see it. And I called my mom and I was like, hey, is my deck at the house? And she was like, well, I see this bag here and there's some cards in it. And I was like, yeah, whatever. So
there it is. Yeah.
We could have turned around like the 45 minutes. And I was messaging my friends, and Sable Creech had like the entire deck built. Like they had built it. And I just like borrowed their exact cards and my friend's 101 Gardevoir line that I put in the deck the night before, and like did the whole tournament without my cards because I left the deck at home. Yeah.
Well, that's where it helps to have the good friends, you know?
Yeah. But the funny part about Sylveon is like when I stopped playing Sylveon, I went against Sylveons after the fact. I would like be playing Zoroark or Zoropod or something. I never lost to a Sylveon in tournament. I don't think that people actually put pen to paper about what the Sylveon player searches for. So like, let's say they play a Flare Grunt and a Max Potion. What do you think they're going to search for? They're probably going to search for a Flare Grunt to get rid of your next energy and a Max Potion to heal the damage. So then why in my right mind am I ever going to attach to my active and attack? Because they already have the cards they need in their hand. So then the next turn, they're like, okay, they didn't attack. Maybe they're just waiting to end me. So I'm gonna search for Skullgrunt, and then that's the turn that you play like N into attack and like make them whiff. I've never lost to a Sylveon that way. Like just like I think that no one, if people maybe, I I question if I ever would have done as well as I have if people ever considered what I thought about
Mm.
when I played it.
Yeah, what was it a deck that it like? Because I see you played. I'm just looking at like some of your lists. Like you played DTE. Like, did you eventually look to attack after you ran your opponent out of energy, or?
So funny enough, we didn't play Handiwork for the first like month and a half because we were like, oh, you just get them to nothing and then you start fairy winding. It's fairy colorless, fairy 2 colorless 110. Like you just start attacking. And I actually tied around to that tournament that I should have won because I didn't play Handiwork. I thought that he prized his last double colorless. So I started attacking. I get to 2 prizes left, and then he goes N attach, or attach N, and I lose that game because I draw 2 cards and I don't have a way to get out of the damage. And after that, I was like, oh, we should have just been playing Handiwork all along because we've got the Lusamine loop. Like, why are we trying to attack? We're putting ourselves in a spot that we're going to lose the game. You definitely attacked with Gardevoir GX because we used to say, like, we used to say that Infinite Force is triple Flare Grunt, is what we would joke. Because it's like, you just knock out their Volcanion and you discard 3 energies off the board. Like, you don't need to try to get rid of every single energy if you can just like take 2 prizes and get rid of that threat. And Gardevoir was super good. I definitely like it. Also checked how much energy the Gardevoir could attach against you because they needed like you had 240 with a dumbbells and you put 1 energy on you always, so they had to put 7 energy on themselves or like a choice band to like knock you out. And with the Gardevoir, they couldn't overcommit because then they would just get return KO'd and they have all those energies on themselves. So then they had to put themselves into 2-shot territory. And if they're putting themselves into 2-shot territory, that means that they're in like Flare Grunt Max Potion territory. And so that matchup became like really easy after that point that we had the Gardevoir because they could never just like go for broke and like kill you.
That's really interesting. Now you did kind of mention this with in terms of talking about like the playstyle you like. Recently, you've had a lot of success with Mew, especially the top 4 at Fort Wayne. Did you play Mew at all before this like DTE kind of not control-y, but like the version of Mew that has control over the game? You know,
Yeah,
did you play the deck much before that?
I never played the fusion version, but I also didn't play. I played in Knoxville of 2019, and then did not play in a regional until Baltimore of this season. So I went like all of COVID, and then I didn't play anything during the 2022 season. I was like still teaching, and it like didn't work with my schedule and whatnot, and what was going on in my personal life. So Baltimore came, and I talked with my friend Nick Brassel, and we'd like kind of like gone to all of our regionals together from the point that we started playing in East Tennessee, and it was like we handshook on the fact that we were going to play good decks. Like we had always been trying to like break the format or like come up with something innovative, and I determined that I liked winning more than I liked feeling smart or like feeling like I was like unique in a way. Um, and so this season I've played Palkia, Mew, 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 and I feel really good about myself. Like just like putting like this is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to play the deck that I think is really good for this tournament. Um, so Orlando was my first regional that I played Mew at, but I had gone to like 2 or 3 of my local tournaments, and I never did worse than X1 with Mew against like anything that was kind of brought up against me. So I was like, yeah, this is the deck I'm taking to regionals, and I've just been a Mew bot since then. I'm sad that I don't have an EUIC performance on here. EUIC was the least lucky I've ever gotten with Mew. I hit 2 Giratinas, and that matchup's awful. I lost 2 mirrors, and I'd never lost a mirror before. One of them, I went first, and I went Chromatic Tails into Chromatic Tails to pass. It was just like
I know the
the
feeling. I
the
know the feeling.
the cram giveth and the cram taketh away.
How are you feeling about Mew in general? Like now, post rotation, I know everyone was kind of freaking out at first that everyone's playing Drapion. This is unwinnable. How do you beat Giratina? And it, got top 4. It's still solid.
I think it's okay, but I also think that everything's okay. The one advantage that Mew has on any deck in the format is that if you stumble for a turn against Mew, Mew will win every time. It doesn't matter what the matchup is. If you ever like pass and don't attack, or like kind of like whiff an energy at an important time, or like just don't really do anything on your turn, Mew will win the game against any deck in the format, which is part of why I've always been drawn to it. Like you definitely like live or die by the judge path, and like sometimes they have it and sometimes they don't. But I think that Brad Nelson is a Magic player, not a Pokemon player, and some of the best like he didn't say it to me, he said it in a piece of content, but some advice that I've thought about is like you always just got to make them have it. Like, and I think that like the judge path is totally okay because like you got to make them have the Ultra Ball for Pumpkaboo. You got to make them hit the right side of Capturing Aroma to get Pumpkaboo right now. You got to make them have the Mezagoza, or like you Roxanne someone and like they got to draw off of it. Like I lost in top 4 regionals because they drew off a Roxanne, but like you got to make them do it. It's your best line. So like I think that Mew is like it's kind of a gatekeeper in a way of like okay, you got to do something right now. Like you got to have the Drapion in the way to Buckle Stadium. You got to have the turn 2 Summoning Star, or like all of these things because you will just lose. The thing that sucks for Mew is I think that you lose. I think that Quick Ball rotating is worse for you than it is any deck in the format. And I talked about this on the roundtable I did with the tag team podcast too, because a lot of decks in the format like they just play Quick Ball to set up, or even like Lugia, like they'll get their Archeops with it. But you play Quick Ball on turn 6 just to discard a card to draw 2 cards, and that's way more impactful than like ever discarding an Archeops is because they still have like Research and Ultra Ball. So like your thinning is way worse. So I actually played the Squovit, and I think that the Squovit's insane. I talked to Pablo
It
about it.
seemed pretty cool. I like the
It's
idea.
so good. Yeah, I'll come back to it, but like I think that Mew overall, like it definitely gets worse, but in the scheme of everything getting worse, it's like I think that it's still okay. Like it feels worse to play. I'm not gonna lie. Like having Nest Ball over Quick Ball sucks. Like the one Feather Ball is nice. It's like a 5th out to Mew VMAX, but like Nest Ball is a complete downgrade. Losing Rotom Phone and the versions that played it is massive. Like there's like tons of things that are definitely like micro sub optimizations, but like it does add up to being percentage points of your consistency. But I think that like Lost Box loses Scoop Up Net, they're way less consistent. Lugia loses Quick Ball and Evo Instance, they're less consistent. Like there's just all of these like it's you're not the only deck that's suffering from rotation. Like it's hard to analyze the impact of a rotation because we haven't had one in so long, but like if every deck that was an 8 becomes a 6, then like pretty much everything's still going to be good. Like that's why we still see like Lugia doing well. That's why we still see Mew doing well. We still see Lost Box like performing. Like it's not like these decks are gone. They just like suck a little bit more. But if everything's worse, then like the format power level comes down, but you're still better than whatever the next like 2 tiers below it is.
What you were saying about like the judge path make them hit, like I think Mew's advantage also is that no other deck can reliably do that turn 1. Like Mew can do that turn 1 and probably has the highest odds of then unbricking themselves compared to any other deck. At the challenge I was at this weekend, I like turn 2 as Lugia, like turn 2 judged a Lost Box and then brick myself, and I was like, cool. Like Mew can very easily like turn 1 judge path and probably just get out of it by the next turn, and then just your opponent's now a turn behind.
Yeah, you've got Lost Vacuum, you've got Forest Sealstone, you've got other counter stadiums. Like even just like you can lock yourself if you're announcing Max Miracle. Like usually you can't lock yourself if you're announcing Technoblast, but there's definitely times where it's like, cool, if I like I have like an escape rope in my hand. If I lock myself and I don't draw out of it, I still get to do stuff. Like you boss me on my Genesect, okay, cool, I've gotten out. Or like I can say Technoblast because next turn I can also say Technoblast with this escape rope in my hand. Like it's definitely some resource management about knowing like when you can get screwed over. It's actually more important to think about what you have left when you're gonna lock yourself and be like, oh, okay, I've actually played 2 Lost Vacuums. I have a Lost City in the discard pile. So if I play Path and they judge me, what does my hand look like? Like that's when you gotta be you shouldn't be playing Path unless you haven't out or you just get massive game state advantage from doing so. And if you like play it and then they hand disruption you, like it's so easy for things to go wrong. Like if they just go like Roxanne, Lost Vacuum, your Forest Sealstone, the game's probably over.
And in general, I don't know how much of the stream games you watch, but how did you like like Pablo's innovation of the deck and how he played Mew this format.
I thought it was super sweet. I think that I've definitely seen the list that had like the 4 path for Lost Vacuum before. Lost Vacuum is also just a way to be able to like thin cards out of your hand. Avery is a card that I think has a place in the metagame, but is like underexplored, and so I think it's really cool in here. The only cards that I question are like Fan of Waves. So Fan of Waves and Double Choice Belt are what he played where I played Aerodactyl this weekend. I've been a big Aerodactyl hater, but I knew that the Lugias would have no answers to Aerodactyl right now, and so I thought that Aerodactyl for like the first time was actually correct. But the reason why I was considering Second Choice Belt and Fan of Waves, but my logic was like if Lugia is at the point where you're using Fan of Waves and the Second Choice Belt to like knock out a Tyranitar, you've already probably lost because that matchup's really bad. And game two, if they know that you have Fan, they can just put like 2 V guards on a Lugia or 2 V guards on a Tyranitar, and it doesn't stack, but it makes it so you can't fan away whatever effect they want to have. Like if they want to knock you out with 2 gift energy so that you can't Roxanne them into nothing with a fan, they can do that because they just get to search for 4 energies a turn and attach one. So I definitely thought that Fan of Waves was on like the lower end of cards to run, but he doesn't have Aerodactyl in his list. It's another item. You can discard a Cramomatic. It's good in the mirror. It's like not the worst thing that you can be. Like if they have any special energy and you're just trying to draw cards, you can play it just to do so. So I definitely think that like everything in his list looks really solid. Just assuming like it's all about what you want to like respect and disrespect. Like this list respects Lugia and disrespects Lost Box. Like he doesn't have Silene, which is super important in the Lost Box matchup, just to be like more power tablets to use Psychic Leap more often. And I see that he has 3 boss. I also ran 3 boss for EUIC. I think with Klefki in the format, that is very correct. So like that's just like it's not a bad card that you're running, but it's just like choices about what you respect and what you don't. So I definitely like what he's going for, and also like because he's disrespecting Lost Box, he's not playing Lost City for Drapion, and I don't even think Drapion's that bad, but we can cross that bridge in another talking point where it's like you just gotta make them have the Clara or something. Like you just put the path in play, and they gotta have Clara Stadium bump off of Roxanne. Like go nuts.
It does feel like at UIC, most of the top players just kind of fully disrespected Lost Box, and it seems like most of them were right to do that, but we'll see how things go with the next regional. Obviously, things could easily change, with the future regionals coming up.
Yeah. But about Drapion, like people ask me how to beat Drapion, and what I tell them is like, just assume that you start the game with 4 prizes remaining, and they start the game with 3 prizes remaining, and like they're gonna get their 3 prizes with Drapion. You're gonna get the knockout on it in return. So it's like, just how do you take 4 prizes before they take 3? And like so many people live in infamy of Drapion, but it's like Drapion's 2 free prizes. You play Power Tablet in your deck for a reason. Just like take them. And I think that a lot of people just get tunnel visioned on the Mew matchup. Like I beat so many people who go against Mew because they just like think they have the matchup in the bag because they have a Drapion in their deck. It's like, no, you do actually have to think about like when is the right time to use it. Am I gonna get put into Roxanne territory if I use it now? Like this, that, and the other. So it's definitely not just like a freebie when you have it. It certainly helps. I'm actually kind of glad that Drapion exists because Mew would just be like a runaway in the format without something like that. I do think that the Spiritomb that's coming out might be the nail in the coffin because the Fusion Strike build usually sucks, and having to play the Fusion Strike energy to protect your Genesect from drawing cards seems really bad. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
For sure, we have a few more months before we have to deal with that issue.
Yeah, I get to run it back with Mew a couple more times before then.
Outside of your success with the standard format, you're also a big fan of the cube format, which is kind of a alternative way to play the Pokemon TCG. For anyone who isn't familiar with cubing, could you tell us a little bit about what cubing is, how it works, and why do you like it so much?
So Cube is a alternative draft format of the Pokemon trading card game where if you have played Magic or similar games, you create these packs, and out of a pack, you'll look at 15-ish cards or something, pick one of them, and then pass the pack to the next person. From the person on the other side of you, they've just opened a pack, they've taken a card out of it, and now you're looking at that pack with one less card. And the reason why cubes are really prominent in Pokemon is because, or why they're especially common in Pokemon, like Magic still has cubes too, but Magic just has like their limited format. Like when you open a booster pack, a conventional booster pack, it is set up in a way that if you and enough friends open enough of the booster packs, you could draft that set and you could build decks from it. The problem with Pokemon is that you're not guaranteed to get your Charmander out of one pack and a Charmeleon out of another pack and a Charizard out of the next pack. The Pokemon packs just aren't built in a way where you can make evolution lines like that. And so cubes fix that construction by some people have what's called a non-mutant cube, which is there'll be like a 10-8-6 Charizard line. So that within the cube there's 10 Charmanders, 8 Charmeleons, and 6 Charizards. So that you can draft like a 4-4-3 Charizard line out of your packs. Or my cube is this variety, and there's others like it, is a mutant cube, which means that any Pokemon of a type can evolve into any other Pokemon of that type. So Bulbasaur can evolve into Grovyle, can evolve into Rillaboom. It just means like as long as it's the same type of Pokemon, you can evolve that way. And so you create a deck, either like 40 or 60 cards, depending on the format. You draft supporters, you draft your item search, you get energies for free, and then you just play games in whatever format you desire. After that, you can do double elimination, you can do round robin, etc., etc.
How did you like end up finding cubing? Because it's definitely kind of and it's been growing in popularity, especially since COVID. And I know OmniPoke's a big fan of cubing. He's made a lot of videos about it. How did you get involved in cubing, and how can someone start cubing? Because obviously, like as someone who's like started building his own cube, it is a lot of resources just to put one together, because you're essentially building a set.
Yeah, so scrub out on enough Sundays, and you'll find some people probably cubing at events. But in all seriousness, I mean, that is just how I found out. There were some Virginia players that had a cube. Richard Lovern was the cube that I actually inspired mine on. And you just like find people who are sitting around and doing it. The two main resources that I would like to call out is there is a Facebook group called Legend Box. It works out really well flavorfully because most people have their cube in a box. And it's also a trading card game from the Heart Gold Soul Silver era. And people post about their cubes in there, and usually at events they'll call out like when and where they're drafting. The secondary resource is Cube Koga, which is a website where you can create your cube. You just like make an account with your Discord, and through it you can create sample packs. You can like update card changes. You can see like a change log of like what cards you take out from a set and what cards you put in. And it's a really easy way to like share your cube with other people, but also just to see inspiration for cubes. So the ones that they have as like the most popular is like a Delta Mutant cube, Puka's Chaos cube, which I know a lot of people have built, Omnipoke's cube, like you mentioned, and like you can see what people do with like just 2-player cubes or cubes for much larger groups. You can favorite cubes. It's a great resource. So I would definitely, if you're interested in cubing at any point, there's also a really great Jaywitz video from, I think at this point, it's like 2 years ago, about like what is cube and why does it work for Pokemon. So if you want like a longer description, you could do that. But Legend Box, that Facebook group, and then cubekoga.net are the two like big cube resources I would call out.
Now, before we start kind of wrapping up, I do have one last cube question for you, especially since you said you do like the mutant cube, where as long as it's the same type, you can kind of evolve anything. Do you have any particular like favorite interactions you've had come out of cubing that way that you really enjoy?
Oh, buddy, yeah, I can think of so many. The two that come to my head. So my cube control is pretty good. Like I do like control, but I also think that control is something like where a lot of people get annoyed, like they have to face control. I think that a good deck should be able to interact with a Pokemon control deck well. So my cube has like Trump Card and Super Energy removal and Lusamine and like these cards that people like sit in anguish on, because like if you're not building a dedicated control deck, they're pretty fair. And if someone like, it's kind of like drafting Storm in Vintage Cube, if that means anything to anyone out there. Like, it's a deck that's like, this is the format to build some like crazy nonsense. So like, you might as well have it. I have 5-0'd my cube with Shocklock before, very similar to like the expanded deck. I had a Rangaroo and Bunnelby, and was devolution spraying my Raichu onto my Pokemon. Someone else, they didn't do as well, but they built Shocklock and they used the Regieleki from what's it called? The one that gets a item back or a trainer back to your hand, electromagnetic sonar. So that would be their active. Yeah, yeah, that would be their active. Then they evolve it into the devolution spray, the paralyzed Raichu. Then they play the de-evolution spray, and then they use electromagnetic sonar to get back de-evolution spray. So now the Raichu and the de-evolution spray are back in their hand. Um, Other interactions I like is that I have both Robosub and Lily's Pokédoll in my cube, and technically they are colorless Pokemon. So you can evolve Robosub into a Bibarel or a Pidgeot or whatever. Um, and then just like I think there's just like tons of fun stuff that you're able to assemble like cards from years like long ago that like you would never think would be like ever existing in the same format. Like there's that batch of like Prism Pokemon that like when you bench it you accelerate 2 energy onto it. When you evolve it into a stage 1 that can attack for 2 energy, like you've almost powered that up for free. Or just being able to see like all of the Magna Zones. I'll keep the draw one and the one that's putting energies into play, and then like just tons of different stuff. I had dual brains in the cube for a while, but I thought that it wasn't good enough. Like I think that it's fun because there's a silly nature to it, but mine is like high power, which means like this in terms of like how good the cards are in comparison to each other. It's like it's very strong. Some people build like low power cubes where you're like 2 or 3 shotting Pokemon and like the games take much longer. But it all just depends on what you want to build. But I think that it's a ton of fun. Like I can't advocate for cube enough. If you're interested, like you don't have to go out of your way and spend tons of money on a cube. Like if you look at the price tag on some of the cubes that you see online, like it can seem really daunting, but printers do a lot of work. Like you can definitely like print off some proxies. You don't need a real tropical beach, or you can start off by like printing out some cards, and then before you buy something on TCG Player or wherever card market, if you're in Europe, like make sure you like the format before you go out and spend a bunch of money on it. My cube, like if I told you how much my cube is worth, you'd be shocked, but it's also just like cards have gone up in price over time. Like I think I bought my Cynthia Caitlin full art for like $30 when it was $30, and now it's like much more than that. So it's like, and also you just like don't need to like have super high rarity cards in your cube. One of my good friends in the community, Christian Kennedy, built my cube, uh, and his is just a complete minimum rarity version of it, like all like just the regular cards, and like we still like it's the same format, so like we're both able to like share the decks that did well in each other's drafts. Like our decks just look a little bit different. Like mine has every piece of shiny cardboard that's probably ever been printed for those cards, so it's like you don't need to like I just don't want people to be intimidated out of what's a super fun format because of like a fake price tag when there are ways that you can do it. Right now, I'm actually talking with Joe Bernard about an idea that he had. He was working on like a common, uncommon cube so he could like bring it to Worlds, and it's super small in his luggage. And then I had the idea of making it more based around like the pre-release kits, because I think that the last bunch of pre-releases are like awesome. Like they're a ton of fun. And so like you could almost take the pre-constructed pre-release decks and put them in a cube format with like enough ultra balls and nest balls and researches to kind of still build consistent decks. But the power level, like those decks were built to be fair enough to go against each other, so you know that they're going to kind of be like within the same power level as the rest of the stuff. Like as long as you don't go like, as long as you're not comparing black and white pre-releases to Sword and Shield pre-releases, but everything within like the Sword and Shield block, like I made a whole list of all the pre-release promos, and I think it'd be super cool. Like I might try to put that together if I feel like putting together a second cube. Curliers are like $6 for the pre-release promo, and I would want like 8 of them. So it's like,
Yeah,
well,
when
who
the time
knows?
comes, right?
Yeah, yeah. We need Gardevoir to do bad at the tournament instead of getting second at the IC, so I can buy some Curlias.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know that's kind of the cool part. Like, there's just so much flexibility, and I know you mentioned like at the very beginning that Empoleon you liked so much. Like, you like this card from back in the day. Like, put it in your cube. Like, there's a way to keep playing those cards without having to
Yeah,
build 10-year-old decks and face them against each other. Like, you can continually play those cards through a cube.
yeah, and like the cards that are in my cube are some of the ones that I've like done really well with in the past. Like it's kind of fun to like be able to like look through. I know that the Acerola, the full art that's in that cube, has creases that are like probably like half an inch down the top of the card from how much that card has been riffle shuffled in tournaments. The Miriam that is in there, I pulled out of my top 4 packs from Fort Wayne. I pulled an alternate art, the Illustrator Rare Miriam, and like that's in there. The Serena that I pulled in there is a rainbow rare that I pulled at the pre-release. Like it's just like all this kind of like fun stuff. I know like who I got individual cards from. I got a secret rare Blastoise from Connor Fitton in his store, the Deluge one. I like there's a Lucario that it was in a blister that only came out in Europe. That its ability is just like when you evolve into it, draw 2 cards. The attack kind of sucks, but I had it just for the ability, and we didn't get this card in English. So I had a friend that lived in UK, and I ordered 3 of them on Card Market, and I sent them all to him. They were like $15 each, just so that I could make sure that one of them got to him because I'd never used Card Market. Only 2 of them arrived, and then he shipped them from the UK to me, so I could have that card in my cube. Like it's just like I've enjoyed that part of the game where it's like nowadays I just go to the pre-release and I just like I go through my locals. I'm like, hey, what'd you pull? And they're like, oh, I pulled a Miraidon and a Toxicroak. I'm like, no. Like, what's your crap? Like, give me your stuff that you don't want. I'm like, can I have this reverse hollow Bisharp that you like don't need? Like, it's a lot of fun. Like, it gives me a reason to look through all the sets too and like think about like, is this good enough for standard? Yada yada. Like, I think it's a really fun way to interact with the game. Like sometimes we get so tunnel visioned by like, is this like standard power level? Or like we don't get excited for a design that's really cool because it like isn't gonna show up in a deck because it's not like strong enough. But like there'll be stuff that gets revealed, like the Pelipper that's coming out, that like when you evolve into it, you search your deck or discard pile for a supporter. Like obviously people are a little bit more excited for that one than the average card, but I saw that and I'm like, that's immediately going in the cube. Like that's a cube staple. Like that's going in and it's never getting taken out. Or like just these cards that like people would forget that were really cool. Like Trump card obviously is an example of a card. It's like when you got to Versus Seeker that card, it's like really annoying. But how does it change the game when you get to play one and that's the only time it's going to get played because you probably didn't get the Versus Seeker in the cube? Like there's just so many different. It changes your card evaluation. It changes the way you think about stuff, and like I think that I'm definitely better at playing standard because I enjoy like because I've played a lot of cube. Like not even because like of knowing what random cards do, but just like it forces your brain to engage with the game in a different way. Like how many times can you play Lugia against Lost Box and say that like by the 50th time you've played the matchup, you've gotten that much better at it than the 5th time? Like I think that it just changes the way that you like interact with resource management and taking prize cards and deck building. Like gotta have enough ways to take prizes in a game. Like my people use the term now like prize mapping. Like how do you take enough prizes to win the game? And I think that Cube makes you a lot better at that. So it's just like all of these random points to be said that I think that it's a really fun way to engage with a much larger percentage of cards that get printed than just the 7 or 8 decks that you see in standard at any given moment.
On that note, I think we've sold Cube pretty well. If none of those were reasons to play Cube, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with you because I think Zander made it sound pretty amazing. You should definitely give it a shot if you scrub out of regionals. I'm assuming he'll be playing day 2, but find someone who's playing a cube. I'm sure you'll be able to find someone to play with.
This is gonna sound like the most first world problem of all time, and like viewers at home, you can laugh at me or be offended or insulted. I'm sorry, but from that 4 regionals that I day 2'd back to back to back to back, I did not get to cube at any of them. And I've had my cube in packs, sorted. I upgraded it with Scarlet Violet. I was so pumped. And it's like, I am so much more excited to cube draft than I am to play standard at any given moment. And so then, like, I'm at Peoria or whatever, and they're like, how do you do? And I'm like, oh, like, I'm 7-1-1. And they're like, that's great. And I'm like, yeah, but it means I don't cube draft tomorrow. It just means I gotta play the same dumb standard format. And I know that that's like to maybe like entitled or like silly to like have that approach, but it's like I know what I'm here for. I'm here for the fun random stuff that is not playing standard. Standard gets me in the building, but like it doesn't give me a reason to go see my friends and like laugh around the table like you do, like playing side events or vending or cubing or whatever. Like it's a reason why we all show up, but it's definitely not the reason why you're still friends. So
Yeah, none of us are getting back together in 5 years to play Lugia versus Lost Box, right?
okay, so I actually think that I think call me crazy, but I don't think that format was that bad. I think it was just long. I think that
I would agree. I would agree.
Lugia was definitely like a solid point or two better than the rest of the format. But I think that people are going to look back in like not a year, but give it like 5 years and have better memories of this format than they do right now. I think that the format shook up every tournament. Like the fact that you can't tell me that Eternatus winning the sixth or seventh major of this format makes it like it's not a bad format if a rogue deck is winning like a major that late into the format. You cannot look me in the eyes and say that the metagame isn't changing from tournament to tournament. And like I think that the nitty gritty of Lugia lists, like going to town over what their last two cards are, is super interesting. Like the whole like, do we play the Bird Keeper because we think Palkia is good, or like these like tiny little list decisions that definitely like make or break your tournament. I think that's all super fun. So like to anyone who's saying that this like not the post rotation format because I'm really not that high on the post rotation format, but to anyone saying that the pre rotation format was bad, I think you're using the wrong word. I don't think it was bad. It was just long. And like, do I want to play that format again right now? Absolutely not. But like, we've played much worse formats than the Sword and Shield through Silver Tempest or Crown Zenith format by far. And if you're really like, maybe it's just the people who are newer to the game who don't have the hindsight approach that I do. Like, you didn't ever have to go against Toadpuff in Standard. You didn't face Wailord. You didn't go up against Night March as it proceeded to get better and better and better every single set. Like, I think that this standard is, or the prior standard was like really diverse. And like, yes, Lugia was better. I'll own it. Like, I know that Lugia was the best deck in format, but like, different decks were making top eight and like advancing, and lists were changing, and it wasn't just like stock. I think that it was really neat. Like, you had to be conscientious about what your 59th and 60th cards were. Like it's not just autopilot mode. So that's my hot take. And I'm willing please if you're listening to this, get in the comments. Find me on Twitter at Zander Bennett. Disagree with me, start a discussion because that's what I love about this game. But I don't think that this format or the previous I keep saying this format. It's hard to separate them because this format is very similar to the previous one. But I don't think that like the pre-rotation format was really that bad. It just it you never want to play a standard for 6 months, and Crown Zenith did nothing. So like I get why people don't like it. Like you're telling me the best card that got added into standard is Sky Seal Stone, like that's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah, we still never. I don't still don't think Radiant Eternatus has made a day two yet. So people definitely are not the biggest fans of Crown Zenith.
Hey, but Dan's got a limitless page. You can't tell me that any format where Dan has a limitless page is a bad format.
I also was wrong. Apparently, Radiant Eternatus has two limitless pages.
Wait, really?
Yeah, there's a in Charlotte 99th place Lost Zone Reshiram box. Played a Radiant Eternatus
You're
and
capping.
one Flying Pikachu VMAX.
No Pika?
No, just they were just I guess they were no no Charizard, no Greninja. They were just Eternatus for their Flying Pikachu.
Okay, that's like almost hilarious because then the Pikachu never gets knocked out and they have to boss kill a 310 HP Pokemon. That's like almost better, and you have 4 Quick Ball in your deck. Okay,
Wow, how have I not
that's
seen this before? This is fascinating.
this is very interesting. Actually, I bought like a playset of this Reshiram when the only amazing rare that I bought before Mirage Gate came out was this Reshiram. I bought no Raikous, no Rayquazas. I was like, this is so sick. With a choice belt, you do like 300 damage. It's insane. And made the wrong money move, but I only spent like $1 on them.
To start wrapping us up, I know you are very close to your Worlds invite. If
Yeah.
anyone is looking to see you at future tournaments, where will they find you?
I just tweeted today about if I should go to Hartford or not. I still got to talk to Autumn and determine like if Worlds is even financially possible, and if it is, like, is it worth going to Hartford? There's a very real chance that I don't go to Hartford or Milwaukee, and I just hope to bank on cups. I hope to be at Milwaukee. Either way, if I'm not at an event, and you'll see it on Twitter if I'm going or not, you can find me there at Zander ZanderBennett. I do currently not do any YouTube comment. I occasionally stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/townmap, but the O is a zero, so T0WNMAP. But yeah, if you're looking to get in touch with me, I think my Twitter's public. Feel free to at me with whatever random questions or argue with my takes that I've got about different formats. Or if you just had a question about anything here, I love like talking to people about the game. If you have questions about the Fort Wayne list and stuff, I know that's old news now, but like hit me up. I have truly like some of my best friends at the game are people that message me out of the blue now, and I've just talked to you about decks ever since. Like it's a great community for like meeting people. I would love to help answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I was really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm glad that this is a fun little trip down memory lane about prior accomplishments and whatnot. I am only 80 points away from my World's Invite, which is why I'm like not certain about if I want to go to Hartford or Milwaukee. It's like if I go to Hartford or Milwaukee, then I get a 256. If I get a 256, then I only need, or no, not a 256. A 256 at the international was like enough for an invite. I would need 60 points, which is a top 16. Either way, it would definitely help to go to a regional, but I also can like get a first and a top four to League Cup or 2 seconds. So I'm not super worried about it. And if I miss, like in my head, I'm like, if I miss my invite from this point, I don't deserve to get one. It's kind of the way that I see it. Like I think there's a large attitude of like entitlement towards invite. So like the term of like my invite sometimes get on my nerves. I know like we use it because it's like short and colloquial, but like no one is owed an invite. They do have to earn it. So like in like if I don't get my prospective invite from whatever league cups and maybe regionals and NAIC, like sue me. It's like, what can you do? Um, I am not thrilled about cups coming back because like the invite is an arbitrary number. Like whatever number they decide to have it is just however many points they say that the difficulty level is. And so like league cups, like I really like the fact that I played in 6 tournaments this season and I'm like 80% of the way to my invite, and that feels awesome. Like I just I love playing Pokemon as much as the next guy, but I don't want every single one of my weekends to be like, well, I have to go to this league cup and I have to go to this league cup and I have to go to this regional. And then with the invite being 500, you're incentivized to go to more league cups and more regionals and BFL and stuff. And I'm not even like a top 16 grinder. Like I've never been, the closest I was ever to that race was just because I got a top 4 at Fort Wayne. Like I was like 19th and I didn't realize how close I was. So it's like, uh, I just, I like, obviously I don't want to take, cups are like the main way that people engage with the game at a local level. It's how they get the confidence to go to a regional for the first time. Like cups are awesome. I just hope that the OP system has a little bit more conscientious nature towards what to do with league cups than what they currently have in place. Like maybe they apply to your invite, but not towards top 16. Maybe the BFL is different. This is not my job to figure out, so I'm not going to sit here and spitball like I have solutions. But I just like, I don't want the invite to be 500 and then I just got to go to like 8 league cups.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to Zander for being so generous with his time. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you're interested in hearing more conversations like this one, please consider giving our podcast a follow, review, or rating wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on social media, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at memcappodcast, or if you want to see me post about my own TCG experiences, you can follow me on Twitter at RZGladys. I hope you have a great day, and thank you for listening.